You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. College football playoff rankings are out. You all know my least favorite thing in this profession to discuss. Yet I will discuss because it's relevant with LSU in it, but made up rankings by a bunch of people in a hotel ballroom in suburban Dallas about things that don't matter yet with still 3 weeks of football to play, yet we'll all overreact to it. So let's get down to the overreaction now. You know what the great blessing, though, of this was last night? There was a doubleheader of basketball on ESPN, and the first game, and the ranking show was going to be between the games. And the first game between Kentucky and Michigan State went to double overtime. So they had like 10 seconds to do the rankings. So I was thrilled about that, actually. No change in the first five. Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU, Tennessee. No change in the first five. The question obviously came after Oregon's loss at home to Washington. How far would they fall? We now have that answer. Oregon fell 6 spots to number 12, and everybody else bumped up a spot. So LSU goes to 6, USC goes to 7, Bama, Clemson, Utah is your top 10, and there's Penn State at 11. Nothing else really matters. North Carolina at 13, I guess maybe is a scotch relevant because they're a one-loss ACC team that's going to play in the ACC championship. But the fact that they're behind 2-loss LSU, 2-loss Alabama, 2-loss Utah, 2-loss Penn State, 2-loss Oregon, essentially suggests that they are in no way competing for this at all at this point. So, here's the maybe the most interesting thing to me after the rankings show. Reese Davis, who on College Game Day on Saturday was pretty adamant as they were discussing the playoff. Reese was pretty adamant that he would not put LSU over one-loss Tennessee. They have a head-to-head, and he was adamant that he would have Tennessee ahead of LSU. And some of the guys disagreed. And David Pollack among them, who was adamant that the SEC champions should, this is all contingent, of course, on LSU beating Georgia. And should LSU beat Georgia, David Pollack was arguing that LSU would be in. There's no way, his argument was that there's no way they keep an SEC champion out of the playoff. And then again last night, Reese Davis kind of made the same argument on the selection show.
I feel like, at least from watching them and measuring the resumes and everything, that LSU can get in, but not before Tennessee. I mean, head-to-head's not everything, right, but unless you're unequivocally better, it is one of the things. And they didn't just slip past them. They beat them senseless on their home field. At
LSU. And I think that's why Tennessee's sitting in a really good spot.
So if LSU is an SEC champion and beats Georgia, which Tennessee wasn't able to do, we saw the other side of that coin too. You're saying that doesn't change your mind? That's still, LSU's still on the outside looking into Tennessee?
I'm saying they're behind Tennessee. That's what I'm saying.
So you're saying they wouldn't pass them if they beat the number one team in the country?
Not to me. Yeah. I'm saying not to me.
It's really interesting. And by the way, to be very clear, I don't think 2-loss LSU as an SEC champion is a lock. I do not think that. I've shared with you many times already the precedent from 2016, which was Ohio State, a 2-loss Big Ten champion that had the head-to-head win over Ohio State. And the committee chose to put 1-loss Ohio State in over the Big Ten champion that had a head-to-head win over Ohio State. Again, the committee will do whatever it wants to do. And in this instance, the 2-loss team lost to Tennessee on its home field. So I'm not going to sit here and say definitively that a 2-loss LSU, if they beat Georgia, is in. I don't think that's the case. What I will tell you, though, is there is precedent for a 2-loss team. Now, a 2-loss team has not made the playoff yet, but there is precedent for a 2-loss team to get in. And it was 2017. I want to remind you of this, okay? In 2017, the penultimate rankings, okay, the rankings, I guess the third to final rankings. The final rankings would have been after the bowls. But the penultimate rankings, so the rankings before the playoff was set. Clemson was number 1 at 11-1. Auburn at 10-2 was number 2. 11-1 Oklahoma, then 12-0 Wisconsin. That was your top 4 going into championship weekend. Bama was 5, Georgia was 6. Auburn, if you remember, lost a close game early in the season to Clemson. It was 14-6. And Auburn's other loss, as you might remember, was the game in Baton Rouge. That was the biggest comeback in an SEC game in LSU history, in Tiger Stadium history. The DJ Chark punt return, the big comeback against Auburn. That was Auburn's second loss. And that was their only loss in conference. Auburn won the Iron Bowl and got to Atlanta. By virtue of their win over Alabama in the Iron Bowl, Auburn went up to number 2 in the country. So Auburn went to Atlanta, number 2 in the country, in the CFP. Had Auburn beaten Georgia, 2-loss SEC champ Auburn would have been in. We presume. Now, I will point out again, the first year of the playoff, TCU was number 3 in the rankings, in the penultimate rankings. They blew out Iowa State, and then were booted for Ohio State. So, again, the committee can do it at once. But the assumption was that in 2017, had Auburn won the SEC championship game and they were ranked 2 in the polls, in the playoff rankings, Auburn would have been in. So, why does all of this matter? And again, on that day, of course, Auburn lost to Georgia, and Wisconsin lost the Big Ten championship game to Ohio State. So, you ended up having this big shuffle where you ended up having Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Bama all get in. Georgia and Oklahoma played that epic Rose Bowl. Clemson played Bama in one national semi. And then you had the Bama-Georgia national championship game in Atlanta, where, of course, Devontae Smith scored the game-winning touchdown in overtime from Tua, and, Storer was born and all that sort of stuff. But Auburn is the precedent for LSU. And I have largely sat here as we've talked about this and assumed you would have an undefeated Big Ten champion, Ohio State or Michigan, in, and an undefeated TCU. And then the question is, how do you dole out those other 2 spots, however it may transpire? Again, the key for LSU is you still got to beat Georgia. You got to beat UAB, you got to beat Texas A&M, and you got to beat Georgia. So you got to win your next 3 and be 11-2. Otherwise, it's a non-starter. We all understand that. So how can LSU get into the top 4 before they go to Atlanta? That's the question. That's where Auburn was in 2017. Because it's hard to imagine LSU being in the top 4, beating Georgia, and then being ousted, right? Can we all agree on that? So if you look at the rankings as they stand right now, Michigan or Ohio State is going to lose. They're going to play in the regular season finale in Columbus. And one of those teams is going to lose, so they'll be out of the top 4, presumably. That means Tennessee, if they're 11-1, goes into the top 4. So where's the spot for LSU? Well, the spot for LSU is TCU. So you have got to pull hard for TCU to lose. I've basically just been operating under the assumption of undefeated TCU, undefeated Big Ten champ. How do you figure out the 2 spots? What you really need to have happen is TCU to lose, and then the committee to decide what they're going to do. Because if they're sitting there deciding between 2-loss SEC champ LSU and 1-loss Big 12 champ TCU, hypothetically, there's your decision. They will take a 2-loss SEC champ LSU over TCU, I think, undeniably. TCU plays at Baylor this week, and that game is a pick'em. Dave Aranda could do LSU a gigantic favor this weekend if the Baylor Bears are able to knock off TCU. That's exactly what LSU would need at this point to be able to get into those rankings going to Atlanta. Because if LSU's in the top 4, when they tee it up and kick it off against the Bulldogs, and if they manage to win that game, then LSU's in, and you figure out the rest after that. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.